Brian here, and today I wanted to review Andor. The whole show, I finished watching the last episode this week and wanted to talk about it and just how freaking amazing this show is. It's just absolutely mind-blowingly phenomenal as a TV show. It stands on its own without needing to rely on what a lot have deemed fan service, which basically is a lot of legacy characters showing up, a lot of times in weird random ways where you're like, okay, they literally just stuck that in there because they wanted to have some kind of big whoa cameo sort of moment rather than it actually making the most sense for the story. And a lot of Star Wars TV shows have kind of relied on that method. Things like Obi-Wan certainly relied a lot on that. Season 2 of Mando has relied a lot on that. Book of Boba Fett. Just kind of all these shows have gone a little bit more that way, and certainly the sequel trilogy both relied a lot on fan service and destruction of what fans liked. So Andor is completely free of all that, although it does have Mon Mothma, who is a very big legacy character. She's weaved into the show in such a way that she doesn't feel like, oh, it's this big legacy character. It's like she's just a part of the story, serving her purpose, doing what she does in the Senate, which is awesome. Absolutely awesome. So that's really, really cool that it's not relying on that. It's relying on good storytelling, interesting characters, good acting. The cast of this show has been absolutely phenomenal, although a lot of the actors I'm not familiar with. They've just been knocking it out of the park. Andy Serkis knocked it out of the park for the episodes that he was in. I feel like Diego Luna has done a fantastic job. Stellan Skarsgård, he's been fantastic throughout Andor. One of the things I love, speaking of him, is just how gray the series is in terms of its morality. It's not a super black and white, the rebels are the good guys, the Imperials are the bad guys. There is no gray, the rebels are not doing sketchy things, The rebels are doing sketchy things. There's a lot more humanity in the Empire. They're still definitely bad, but you get a little deeper motivation and character depth in the Empire, which I really, really enjoy, as well as those really nice gray areas. I love that we got Saw Gerrera back in a few scenes. I've really felt like in Rogue One, he was almost wasted in the way that he was in there for a little bit and then killed off, because he's such an interesting character, especially if you've watched the Clone Wars and Bad Batch and Rebels and played Jedi Fallen Order, where you have so much of his character. It's like, ooh, yeah, let's get some more of Saw Gerrera. So I absolutely loved that. One big complaint that some people had is that the show had a slower pacing. And it did. And that was brilliant. And never felt like it was boring. Just a little bit of a slower, more methodical, taking the time to really build things up. And that was actually a problem that I had with Kenobi, especially looking back on it, is like they didn't give it enough time to breathe. They didn't give the show enough time to really feel different and unique and just tell the story the way it needed to. It was like we just gotta rush on to the next big set piece. There were a few nice character moments, but characters like Riva and Tala did not get to be built up enough. There wasn't enough of, Obi-Wan's inner turmoil. There just wasn't enough of all these different characters to really make you invest and care, which is something that Andor did so brilliantly. Was it gave you the time to breathe and care about these different characters, all the different side characters. We had enough time to really explore, which was perfect. Absolutely love that about Andor. And I hope that Star Wars TV shows maybe adopt this model a little bit more going forward. Not every story has to be as deep and convoluted and heavy, but give them a little bit more time, a little bit more depth, a little bit more complexity. That's one of the things that I've really missed about the EU, or expanded universe, now called Legends, is that those books had so much more time to breathe and tell story and create interesting characters. And a lot of kind of the new Disney stuff has not done that in that same way. But I feel like Andor really has done that, really has gone to that level of complexity. I enjoy that Andor doesn't treat you like you're stupid. There's a lot of really great subtext here, and it's just absolutely wonderful. So yeah, I'm just really, really in love with the show. One thing I do also like is it's a show that, while not killing off people willy-nilly, is a show where there's high stakes. It's not like, again, coming back to Kenobi, where you know Obi-Wan's coming out, you know Vader's coming out, you know Leia's coming out just fine, all of them are going to be fine. So the stakes are a whole lot lower. With Andor, I mean, you know Cassian, he's going to be okay. You know Mon Mothma's going to be okay. But literally all the rest of the characters are not in them. They're not in, you know, the sequel trilogy. Most of them aren't in Rogue One. And so you don't really quite know what's going to happen. Are these guys going to be okay? And the show is not shy about killing off or removing characters. It actually, in a way, reminded me of that movie World War Z, in the sense of where Brad Pitt's character is just like going from group of characters to group of characters, place to place, but doesn't have as many characters who are just like there the entire time, kind of that core group of characters. It's like, oh, we're jumping from these characters that we maybe only see for 2 or 3 episodes, and then these characters, and a bunch of these characters are killed off, and it's like, whoa, this feels a lot more chaotic and random, and the universe feels bigger. And another thing I really appreciated is, other than Coruscant, we did not have any planets that we were super familiar with. We didn't have a Tatooine episode, or we didn't go to Endor or Hoth or anything like that. We had some mention of some different planets, but really other than that, there was not. So that was really great in just making the universe feel bigger, giving us a different look, seeing some different planets, some different environments. And we also got a really good look into the Empire and just sort of the internal bureaucracy of the Empire. Some people don't love that. I personally really did. I also appreciated not seeing massive characters. Like, some people I know really wanted to see the Emperor, but I was good not seeing the Emperor. I was really happy that we didn't see these big, like, iconic characters that almost at this point can pull you out, where you're like, oh, it's them. It's like that Leonardo meme where he's like pointing at the TV and he's like, oh, it's that thing, or whatever, you know. We didn't have those big moments. There were some subtle ones. We did see Admiral Yularen, and I actually, on the first viewing, missed that until I was watching some YouTube stuff and was like, oh, that's who he is. And personally, that's how I really like my Easter eggs and cameos and things, where it's like, oh, okay, it's that character, or they showed up, or it's that thing, but it's not necessarily obvious, or if you don't know who it is, it doesn't take away from your enjoyment of the show. I think that's maybe the one weakness that, like, Mando Season 2 had. If you didn't know who Ahsoka is, Episode 5 of Season 2 of The Mandalorian would not feel nearly as impactful as if you watched all the Clone Wars and Rebels and know who Ahsoka is. But there's none of that here in Andor. If you stepped into Star Wars completely fresh and new, you might maybe be a little bit confused about the politics, or maybe not, you know, appreciate the grander scale, but you don't have to have seen. Really, you only need to see episodes 4, 5, and 6, and you're as caught up as you need to be for this. You don't have to have watched, you know, all the Clone Wars and Rebels and the other live-action TV shows and everything to understand what's going on in Andor. You don't even have to have seen Rogue One to understand what's going on in Andor. It's just a much tighter, well put together show. I know it's a longer show, so saying it's tighter sounds weird, but really the script is much tighter, much less messy. Really the only big issue I actually had with the show, and this is a major spoiler, is how they killed off Marva, who's Cassian's adopted mother. is that they did it off screen. There was no actually really seeing her die. It was just like, oh yeah, she's dead. You know, one episode she was sick, then there was kind of alluding to she's getting sicker and she was still off screen in a very short scene, and then boom, she's just dead without kind of having that emotional payoff goodbye. In the final episode, there was kind of a hologram that sort of acted as her final goodbye, but to me it felt very jarring in the kind of way you're like, okay, could they not afford to pay the actress for these additional episodes? Were they trying to cut some kind of corner? Versus it actually being like an authentic story choice. So for me, that felt a little bit weird. But other than that, it was very, very strong. The action was strong in the episodes where there was action. You know, it was not a crazy action scene after action scene kind of show. But the action, the heist that happened, the battle, if you can call it a battle in the final episode, it was more of a riot, I guess you'd say. The insurrection, let's call it the insurrection that happened in the final episode, was bonkers, absolutely amazing. It's really nice to see Imperials that can actually aim, stormtroopers that can actually shoot and do some damage. That was really, really cool. It made the characters feel much more vulnerable. Again, one of the only issues I have with something like The Mandalorian, where Mando's got his whole Beskar armor suit, is even if the stormtroopers are like aiming on point, like he's basically indestructible when he's got the Beskar on, so there's not quite the tension. And again, this is not crapping on Mando. I love Mando to death. You can watch my other videos on Mando on this channel. But in terms of like the real strengths of this show, is it allowed the characters to be vulnerable. It allowed there to be much higher stakes. The stakes in Mando are different. Like in Mando season 2, the big stakes were like, what's going to happen to Grogu kind of thing. Whereas in Andor, it's like, okay, who's actually going to make it? Like when all the characters got on the ship in the final episode, except Cassian, and flew off, I was really ready for the Empire to just like shoot that thing down and find out that like most of the surviving main characters were just like destroyed. Like I was ready for that, because that's the kind of show it is. And so wild show, amazing show. That's really all I got to say about it in this video. So I'll catch y'all very soon.